Hey everyone, and welcome. Have you ever felt like when you're reading something, like you're only getting the surface level, like there's a whole deeper meaning that you're just not quite grasping?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, today we're going to try to unlock that deeper level. We're taking a deep dive into hermeneutics.
Ooh.
It's all about understanding, especially when we're talking about texts from different times and different contexts. And you might be surprised how understanding hermeneutics can help you better understand, honestly, anything.
Right?
From, ancient philosophy to the latest news article that has everybody talking.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing, and this is what's really interesting to me. It's actually considered more of an art than a science.
It's true.
So let's figure out why together. What do you think?
Yeah, it's funny, because for a long time, people thought about hermeneutics as like almost like a rigid set of rules. Like you follow the rules, boom, you get the meaning. Yeah. But then, thinkers like Schleiermacher and Gadamer, they came along and said, hold on, hold on. It's more about listening to the text.
Okay.
And there's this great quote that I saw in the materials that we were looking at for this episode. It says, hermeneutics is about letting the text interrogate the reader.
Letting the text interrogate the reader. Wow, that sounds kind of intense.
Yeah.
It also makes me wonder, though, if we're supposed to just listen to the text, could the Bible, or frankly, any text, mean like anything we want it to mean?
Right.
How do we find the right interpretation?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And it really gets to the heart of like what hermeneutics is all about, you see. Because it's not about finding one right answer. It's not like, oh, this is the answer and everybody else is wrong.
Okay.
Think about it more like a conversation. It's like an ongoing conversation between you and the text.
Uh-huh.
So you're going back and forth, and this is called, you hear this term a lot, the hermeneutical circle. And as you learn more, you go through this circle and your interpretation evolves.
So it's not about just being wishy-washy. It's about being open to being like, oh, there's new information. I have to kind of evolve my thinking. I can get behind that. So I like how the materials use this analogy of a jigsaw puzzle. You start with these individual pieces.
Right.
You have a vague idea of what they might be, but as you put more pieces together, then you start to get the full picture.
Exactly. And, you might have to even rearrange the pieces as you go. You might think you had it right, and then, oh, no, this actually goes over here. You have to rethink your initial assumptions. Right. You have to be open to new possibilities as you work through it. Just think about a time when you changed your mind about something. Maybe something big, after learning more about it.
Yeah.
That's the hermeneutical circle in action.
Yeah.
You've been doing it already.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. Okay, that's making more sense. But there's another piece to this puzzle I want to make sure we get to. The materials mention pre-understanding.
Yes.
So what is that?
Well, think about pre-understanding like it's the baggage,
Okay.
You bring to the text, the baggage you bring with you before you even open the book.
Yeah.
So it's your background, it's your assumptions, all your biases, all that stuff.
It's everything.
Everything, yeah. And it all shapes how you see the world, and therefore it's going to influence how you interpret what you read, of course.
So if I'm understanding this right, my pre-understanding is like a lens. It's like a lens that colors everything I'm reading.
You got it. But here's the thing about hermeneutics. Hermeneutics encourages us to be aware of those lenses.
Okay, yeah.
To see how our own perspective might be influencing our interpretation, and, even better, to challenge those perspectives.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about being like, oh, this is my pre-understanding, and therefore this is how I interpret everything. It's about being able to step outside of that, maybe.
Right, to be aware of it.
Yeah, to be aware of it. Okay, so this is getting pretty deep. Something else that stood out to me from the material is this distinction between these abstract philosophical problems versus these questions that arise in real life.
Yeah.
Gadamer seemed to be like a big proponent of that. Why is that distinction so important?
Gadamer was onto something.
Yeah.
He really emphasized understanding texts in their real-world context.
Right.
Not as if they're just floating in a vacuum, like, take the text off the shelf. But it's about seeing how it operates in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah.
How it's used, how it's received, how it interacts with different people.
But like, what's its purpose?
What's its purpose, exactly.
Yeah.
Even how it interacts with different people and their intentions.
And they even give the example of Augustine's writings, on God, freedom, and evil. And like, his whole focus shifted depending on who he was writing to and what he was trying to achieve.
Exactly. he might be talking about the same big ideas.
Right.
But the way he explained those would be very different if he's talking to, like, brand new converts versus, like, seasoned theologians.
Right.
Context is key, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you think about it. You wouldn't explain a complex topic the same way to a child as you would to your coworker.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
You adjust, right?
Yeah, you adjust based on who you're talking to, what you're trying to communicate. It's like we're all practicing hermeneutics every day without even realizing it.
We are. We're constantly interpreting the world around us.
Yeah.
And hermeneutics kind of gives us this framework for doing it, I don't know, maybe more consciously.
Right.
More thoughtfully.
Yeah.
It helps us become more aware of our assumptions, the questions we're asking, and like you said, the biases we might be bringing to the table.
Yeah. So it's about leveling up how we understand and interpret the world around us.
Totally.
I like that. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, the source material throws us a bit of a curveball here.
Okay.
It asks, does hermeneutics make us too skeptical?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Because, if our understanding is always evolving, like we were talking about, can we ever really be sure about anything?
That's a question that has puzzled thinkers for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it seems like all this talk of pre-understanding, the hermeneutical circle,
Yeah.
might just leave us in a state of perpetual uncertainty.
Right.
So what's the point of even trying to understand anything if you can never be sure you've got it right?
Right, exactly. I mean, if everything is constantly up for interpretation, does anything really have a fixed meaning?
That's where this concept of the hermeneutical spiral comes in.
Okay.
Hold that thought because we're going to unpack that right after the break.
All right, so we're back, and I'm ready to tackle this whole hermeneutical spiral thing.
Yes.
I think you were just about to explain that when we took our little break.
Absolutely. You see, the spiral is not about just going around in circles and getting nowhere, fast. It's about spiraling upward.
Okay.
Constantly gaining a clearer, more nuanced understanding as you go. So it's a journey, not a destination. We might never reach, like, absolute certainty.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we're lost at sea.
I like that. So it's like we're climbing a mountain, right? Every step we take, the view gets better and better, even if we never quite reach the peak.
That's a great way to put it. And, along the way, we're gaining new insights. We're connecting the dots. We're refining our understanding of the whole picture. And get this, the source material even mentions that this approach, this whole spiral idea, encourages open-mindedness.
Oh, okay.
And respect for other viewpoints.
That's interesting.
Especially, as emphasized by Emilio Betti.
I mean, I can see how embracing this spiral would make us more humble, less likely to be dogmatic in our interpretations. We're more willing to listen to others, consider different perspectives, and realize that, hey, maybe our own understanding's limited.
Exactly. Hermeneutics, it reminds us that understanding is an ongoing process. It's a dialogue between the text, our own pre-understanding, and even, how other people are interpreting things.
Right.
So it's all about being open to learning, growing, evolving in our understanding.
Okay, so I'm with you there. But here's something that I've been thinking about. Doesn't this create problems when we're trying to make decisions? Like, based on what we understand from these texts. Because if we're never really sure about anything, how can we ever, take a stand?
Sure.
Or act decisively?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
But I think hermeneutics actually gives us a really valuable tool for navigating this complexity.
Okay.
It encourages us to be aware of the limitations of our own understanding.
Yeah.
To be cautious of absolute certainty and to be open to changing our minds as we learn more.
So it's not about saying, like, throwing our hands up in the air and saying nothing matters because we can't be 100% sure about anything.
Right.
It's about acknowledging the complexity.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging that complexity, embracing that journey, and using those tools, those tools of hermeneutics to make the most informed and thoughtful decision possible.
Okay. Now I think it's starting to come together. So hermeneutics, it's not about easy answers. It's not about, claiming we have absolute truth.
Right.
It's about this continuous process of listening, understanding, and refining our interpretations.
It is.
And I think what's really cool is that this approach, like we were talking about, can be applied to, pretty much any text or situation.
For sure.
Not just some old dusty book.
Absolutely. I mean, you can use these principles for everything, like, from interpreting art and music.
Oh, yeah.
To understanding political speeches or even navigating relationships.
Right.
It's about being attuned to those subtleties of communication, how important context is, and how much our own, pre-understanding plays a role.
So we're not just talking about some obscure academic theory. We're talking about a way of thinking that can impact our everyday lives.
Yeah, it can.
Help us be better readers, better listeners, and better communicators.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah.
And so relevant. It's not just about understanding text. It's about understanding ourselves and the world we live in.
I love that. It's like hermeneutics is giving us this new set of lenses to see the world through, to like appreciate the complexities of meaning and engage with a more thoughtful way. But I do wonder, where do we go from here? Like, how do we actually put this into practice?
Well, the first step is just becoming aware of these principles, recognizing the role our pre-understanding plays, how important context is, and the value of that hermeneutical spiral. Once we have a handle on those concepts, then we can start to apply them to our own reading, our own thinking, our interactions with the world.
So it's about developing this more conscious and critical approach to how we understand and interpret things.
Yeah, you got it. And as we get better at this, I think we'll find ourselves becoming, more thoughtful, more open-minded, more engaged with the world around us.
Now I'm really seeing how powerful these ideas can be. But I have to admit, I'm also feeling a bit overwhelmed. It's a lot to take in.
I understand. Hermeneutics can be challenging, but it's so rewarding. And the beauty is it's a lifelong journey. There's always more to learn, explore, understand. And I think with that, we can wrap up for today and, let our listeners process.
Yeah, let everybody go on their own hermeneutical spiral.
Exactly.
All right, so we're back, and I'm starting to, really see the value of all this hermeneutic stuff.
Yeah.
But I think our listeners are probably wondering the same thing I am. How do we actually use this in our lives?
Right.
It's like we've got this amazing toolbox, but I'm not sure what tool to use first.
Well, one really practical tip is to start paying attention to your own pre-understanding.
Okay.
So like next time you're reading an article or listening to a podcast or even, watching a documentary, just take a moment and think about what assumptions you're bringing to the table.
Yeah.
What are your biases? What preconceived notions are you carrying with you?
That's a great starting point. And it actually reminds me of something from our materials. It talked about this idea that doubt comes after belief.
Right.
It's like we're constantly testing and refining our beliefs as we're encountering new information.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of that hermeneutical spiral.
Yeah.
It's like we're not these, static beings with these fixed beliefs. We're always evolving. We're questioning. We're seeking a deeper understanding. It's a process.
So instead of clinging to our beliefs no matter what, we should be open to challenging them and refining them as we learn more.
Right. Be open to the possibility that you could be wrong.
Yeah.
It can be scary, but it's also really liberating.
It is, yeah. That's powerful. This whole conversation has been so eye-opening for now. It's like I'm seeing the world in a whole new light.
I'm so glad. I hope that our listeners are feeling the same way.
Me too. So before we wrap things up, is there one key takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that hermeneutics is way more than just reading.
Yeah.
It's about active listening. It's about understanding. It's about engaging with texts in a really thoughtful, critical way. And recognizing that our own pre-understanding is always shaping how we see the world.
Right.
And being open to challenging those assumptions when we encounter new information.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I think it's safe to say that hermeneutics isn't just for, academics or theologians or something.
Right.
It's something that can benefit everybody.
Absolutely. Anyone who wants to be, a more thoughtful reader, a more critical thinker, or a more engaged citizen of the world.
So for our listeners out there, I'll leave you with this. What are some of your pre-understandings that might be influencing how you see the world?
That's a good one.
What are you holding on to that maybe needs to be questioned or refined? Keep exploring this whole world of hermeneutics.
It's a fascinating world.
It is, yeah. And I guarantee you'll discover this whole new dimension to understanding not just the world around you, but yourself.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into hermeneutics.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.